Okay, the upcoming section is 1.3, which is on rate of change. Okay, so we define the average rate of change of y with respect to x to simply be, well, the average rate is going to be the change in y divided by the change in x, which we can denote by a delta y over delta x, where delta means change in. Delta is a Greek letter, capital Greek letter, that can evolve kind of into a d. You just turn it around a little bit and then round this part of it, and you get a d. Okay. Now there's a little more to it. You got to specify between two x values, or on some interval. Okay? So here's how we would actually state it. Find the average rate of change of y equals f of x equals x squared, for example, on the interval 1/2, 2. The closed interval from 1/2 to 2. Okay. Now, this is the x interval. Okay. The interval from 1/2 to 2 is denoted, can be depicted on a graph of the x squared function, the basic x squared function, the extended basic x squared function. Right here. Here's 1/2, here's 1, here's 2. A dot here and a dot here because it's a closed interval, and everything in between. So for all x values, well, x values then can be thought of as changing from this one to this one, from 1/2 to 2. So this is the interval, closed interval 1/2, 2. What's the change in x? Well, change in x on the interval 1/2, 2 is, well, if you're here, how far do you have to go to get here? This is 1/2, this is 2. From here to here is 1.5. You get that by doing 2 minus 1/2. Now, better to write that as 3/2. We don't like to do a lot of arithmetic with mixed numbers. Mixed numbers are good for locating things on the x-axis, for example, but they're not much good for calculation. So, to find the change in x on interval, we subtract where you start from where you end. Now, I used an example in class. If you got $20 and you go to the bank and you get $70, you get $50, I'm sorry, then the change in the amount of money you have is plus $50. Okay? You get plus $50 because you take the $70 you end up with and subtract the $20 you started with. You subtract what you end up with what you started with. You subtract where you end up, but we subtract where you start from where you end. Okay? So make sure we understand the sense of this, because people often get the subtraction backwards. Okay, so there we have it. That's the change in x. It's 3/2, 1.5, that's from here to here. Change in y, well, the y coordinate for x equals 1/2 is 1/4. So y changes from 1/4 at x equals 1/2, because 1/2 squared is 1/4, right? To 4, which is the value of x squared when x equals 2. So, change from 1/4 to 4 is what? It's 4 minus 1/4, that's 15/4. Now, I'm not going to teach fractions here. Okay, if you don't understand fractions, and many people, I think, still don't, although very many do, you're going to have to go back and review fractions. Now, 4 minus 1/4, you got to have a common denominator, so you multiply 4 by 4 over 4 to get 16 over 4. 4 is 16/4. Subtract 1/4 from 16/4, you get 15/4. You've got to be able to do fractions. You really need to understand what they are, or you won't understand what the numbers are doing in these functions. You won't understand these rates, okay? So you really need to do the fractions. Okay, so anyhow, if you need to do that, make sure you do. If you're not sure what to do, email me. Okay, the average rate then is delta y over delta x, which is 15/4 over 3/2. Okay, delta y, 15/4, delta x, 3/2, which is 15/4 divided by 3/2, which is 15/4 times 2/3 division. You multiply by the reciprocal. Okay? and that's 30 over 12 or 5/2. So that's your average rate, 5/2. Now, what does that mean? In terms of the graph, we can visualize it, okay? We imagine moving from this point to this point. There are two paths we can take from this point to this point. This straight line path along the red line, or this vertical then horizontal path along the green line, then along the blue line. The green line is from 1/4 to 4. The blue line goes from x equals 1/2 to x equals 2. Well, I've made a bit of a picture of this. So here it is. Okay, here's the point 1/2, 1/4, that's this point. Here's the point 2,4, that's this point. Those are points that you need to be absolutely familiar with by knowing instantly how to construct the graph of this basic function, or any of the other 5 basic functions. You can't hold up the process of understanding what we're talking about here by not knowing points on these graphs. Okay, you have to know these graphs. And of course, I'm requiring you to be able to construct them correctly and quickly. And you'll be quizzed on that, tested on that until it happens. Okay, so anyhow, here's the point 1/2, 1/4. Here's the point 2,4, both on the graph of y equals x squared, corresponding to the interval 1/2, 2. There's 1/2, there's 2. The rise from here to here is 15/4. It's from 1/4 to 4. Okay, same as what we calculated over there. And we call that the rise. Okay? This displacement here is from 1/2, x equals 1/2 to 2. So, this is the same as this. Doesn't look at this bad perspective on the board, but my fault. But the change in x is 2 minus 1/2, and that's 3/2. That's called the run. The change in y is the rise. Okay, well, what do? To find the average rate, you divide the rise by the run. Rise divided by run. And nobody seemed to respond much to this when I asked, what is rise divided by run? If you don't know that rise divided by run is slope, that's probably because it wasn't emphasized in what I would consider sufficient. It wasn't sufficiently emphasized in your prerequisite courses. Learning formulas rather than ideas, and there's too much of that in our curriculum. Don't blame your teachers for that. It's the way our curriculum is designed, nationwide, not just locally. Okay, average rate in any case is rise divided by run, which is slope. So, what we want to actually say is the average slope of f of x equals x squared on 1/2, 2. Okay, we say slope. It's the slope in this case of f of x equals x squared on 1/2, 2. That's how we term it. That's how we refer to this situation. Okay, now, another example of average rate of change. Average rate of change of your basic reciprocal square function on the interval -1, -1/2 is what? Well, your change in x is from -1 to -1/2. And that is -1/2 minus -1, where you end up with minus where you start at. Okay? Well, that is then -1/2 plus 1, which is 1/2. The y values, so we got the change in x. We'd have to find the change in y. To find the change in y, we need 2 y values. We need the y value at x equals -1 and the y value at x equals -1/2. Well, f of -1 for this function is 1 over -1 quantity squared, and that's just 1. And f of -1/2 is 1 over -1/2 quantity squared, and that turns out to be 4, and I didn't include the details of the calculation because we've been over them. Make sure you understand how you get from here to here. You're going to have to demonstrate it. You're going to have to show me that you understand it. Okay, so your change in y is what? Well, it's 4 minus 1. Now, I say that's f of negative 1/2 because it's f evaluated at this point, the y value at this point, in other words, minus the y value at this point. Y value at your ending point minus y value at your beginning point. That's 4 minus 1, which is of course 3. So your average rate's delta y over delta x, which is 3 divided by 1/2, which, and you've got to know how to do this, is 6. Among other things, one way to know it is to count. 1/2, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, that's 6. Okay? But you also have to be able to invert and multiply. Excuse me. Okay, so that's your introduction to average rate of change. Open Math will give you more details. Text will give you more details.